Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're joining us from. We'd like to welcome you to this event, which is the launch of our newly updated Carrots and Sticks ESG and Sustainability Policy Database and our new live CSRD tracker. My name's Tabitha Bailey and I'll be hosting this session today. I'm a Senior Advisor in Sustainability Policy and Compliance at Resonate AI, and I'm also one of the co-project leads on the Carrots and Sticks database. We thank all of you for joining this event today. We've got some fantastic speakers lined up and some very exciting content that will be shared with all of you. Whilst we're waiting for attendees to join and get settled, please do, if you have any predetermined questions, please do submit them in the Q&A chat box. And these will be used in the Q&A session at the end of the event. Before we begin, I'll quickly go over some of the housekeeping for the event. Next slide, please, Adam. Thank you. So this session is being recorded, and the recording of the session will be posted on the media section of the Carrots and Sticks website. After the event is concluded, all of those who registered will receive an email which will include the slides from the event, as well as the link to the recording of the event. All of the attendees' cameras and microphones will be off for the duration of the event. If you do have a question, please, of course, send it to us. And as I mentioned before, any questions that you have towards the speakers, please include them in the Q&A chat box, and please also utilize the upvote function, and this will help us determine which questions will be selected for the Q&A portion of the event. So I'll then move on to the agenda. Thank you, Adam. So we've got a packed agenda for this 1 hour. We're going to be beginning with a keynote, and then some individual speaker presentations, and then a moderated panel discussion. And the session will then conclude with an audience Q&A directed by the questions submitted by all of you. And with that, we'll be beginning this session with a keynote from Peter Paul van der Wijs. Peter Paul is a leading independent sustainability strategist and a trusted voice at the intersection of sustainability, communications, and government affairs. With more than 25 years of global experience, he's helped leading businesses and non-profits navigate complex challenges, protect reputations, and deliver results that meet the rising societal expectations. He recently stepped down as the Chief Policy Officer of Global Reporting Initiative, or GRI, where he was responsible for driving the adoption of the GRI standards into the rules and regulations set by national policymakers and capital markets around the world. Prior to that, he's led high-profile advocacy, branding, and media initiatives at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and the Lego Foundation, successfully repositioning organizations and forging innovative partnerships. Earlier in his career, Peter Paul has held various international positions in communications, sustainable development, government affairs, and issues management at the Dow Chemical Company, including leading its global sustainability efforts. Over to you, Peter Paul.
Thanks, Deb. And hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. It's a pleasure to be here and being given the opportunity to share a couple of my personal reflections related to Carrots and Sticks and what we see currently happening in the policy world. Slide 1, please. Yes. So when Carrots and Sticks was initiated by the University of Stellenbosch back in 2006, it covered 19 countries. Sustainability reporting at the time was still pretty experimental. Some people thought it was progressive, many thought it was optional, a communications tool, maybe a branding exercise. Now today, Carrots and Sticks covers 130 countries, 40 languages, and has a methodology that goes well beyond reporting requirements into the actual substance of sustainability legislation. And that shift really matters. Because the story here is no longer about who publishes a report. It's about how sustainability expectations are being hardwired into financial systems, legal frameworks, and market supervision. Next slide, please. Now, let's start with the elephant in the room, the headlines, because we should start there. We've seen reporting rules simplified in the European Union. We've seen political shifts in the US. And there's a narrative now out there that the regulatory tide is turning. And some companies are taking that as a signal to relax. I think that's a mistake. It confuses political noise with structural change. Regulatory cycles go up and down, yes, but capital markets don't forget, courts don't forget, insurers don't forget, and physics, I keep coming back to this, physics certainly don't forget. So looking at carrots and sticks data, it actually shows this. Greenwashing laws are multiplying and the litigation risk related to that is going up. Sustainable finance rules are requiring banks to collect impact data regardless of whether a company is technically in scope of any reporting directive. Stock exchanges are bringing in double materiality requirements, and supervisors are issuing real fines. The 75 million penalty that Crédit Agricole a couple of weeks ago received from the ECB for falling short on the climate risk expectations is a great example of that. So these are not signs of a PR debate that's winding down. This is about access to capital, cost of insurance, regulatory risks, and increasingly operational risk as climate and biodiversity pressures reshape supply chains and asset values in ways that are very hard to reverse. You can simplify disclosure rules, but you cannot simplify exposure to climate risk. You cannot simplify biodiversity loss, and you cannot simplify market scrutiny. That's just not how it works. Next slide, please. And this is precisely why the relaunch carrots and sticks is such a valuable tool. By expanding into a broader sustainability legislation and using AI to analyze legal substance across jurisdictions, it serves as something that I think is really critical. Transparency is no longer the end goal. It's the entry requirement, the floor, not the ceiling. The real challenge now is fragmentation. Different standards, different definitions of materiality, different metrics, different timelines. For companies operating globally, that's expensive and exhausting. For regulators, it's a risk and duplication, and for market, it generates noise instead of the clarity we actually need. And here's what worries me. If sustainability policy is going to drive real-world outcomes rather than just regulatory fatigue, we need alignment. Standard setters and policymakers need to resist the temptation to compete with each other. We don't need 5 definitions of materiality. We don't need overlapping data demands measuring the same things in a slightly different way. We don't need complexity and duplication dressed up as ambition. What we need is coherence, interoperability, and shared foundations. Carrots and sticks gives us the evidence of just how complex this landscape has become. The question now isn't whether sustainability regulation continues, because it will. The question is whether we can make it smarter, more useful, more globally coherent. Because this stopped being a reporting question a while ago. It's a systemic economic question, and if you want markets to actually drive a sustainable future, the rules of the game need to point in the same direction. Now, I'm going to hand over back to Adam, and he's going to dive into the details of carrots and sticks, so we see how it can support us in driving that more coherent policy landscape. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter Paul, for that really insightful keynote. You've really set the scene very nicely for the remainder of this event, in particular your emphasis that we need coherence and interoperability, not fragmentation. I'm now going to hand you over to the next speaker of the event, which is my colleague, Dr. Adam Chalmers. Adam Chalmers is Associate Professor of the University of Edinburgh and the founder and CEO of Resonate AI. He's also co-project lead of Carrots and Sticks, which is the world's leadest database of sustainability reporting requirements. Over to you, Adam.
All right, so thanks, Tab, and it's a pleasure to be here today, marking the what is actually the relaunch of Carrots and Sticks, and then the launch of something new and exciting. That's our CSRD tracker. And I say relaunch because it's important to note from the beginning that Carrots and Sticks is actually 20 years old. Peter Paul kind of intimated that in his talk. And it's built on very solid foundations laid down by a few people I want to mention from the beginning here. This is work over 2 decades from Cornus van der Lugt, Jennifer Ison Rogers, and Wim Bartels. And then in partnership with the likes of KPMG, UNEP, and Global Reporting Initiative. And I've had the opportunity and pleasure of working with people from these different institutions over time, and it's been an absolute pleasure. Most recently, however, Carrots and Sticks is now led by Tabitha Bailey, who you've heard from at the beginning, and myself, both from Resonate AI. In fact, Tab and I have been working over the last several months to fashion this relaunch and put together a new version of Carrots and Sticks. I hope a new and improved version of Carrots and Sticks. And I think we have something exciting to share with you today. So Carrots and Sticks has, for about 20 years, been mapping sustainability globally. Now, our effort here in 2026 is a bit more, right? It's to move beyond simple mapping, to do something a little bit more dynamic. We know we've already heard a little bit from Peter Paul about interoperability challenges and sustainability in flux and transition and fragmentation. So we've really built Carrots and Sticks, or rebuilt Carrots and Sticks, as a live policy intelligence platform. So welcome to Carrots and Sticks 2.0, I suppose. And I think there's three things that are kind of characterizing this new vision. It's a searchable global sustainability policy repository, the second to none, a dynamic CSRD transposition tracker, and then AI-assisted but human-validated monitoring. So I'm going to give you a short walkthrough of the new platform. Let me just make sure that I'm in the right place here. That's obviously incorrect. Bear with me, please, people. So I'm going to just exit this and do this and come here and then do this. All right, so we always need one technical glitch to start, otherwise it's bad luck, I suppose. Carrots and Sticks boasts a repository of more than 2,500 reports from over 130 countries, nearly 80 international and regional organizations, and in 38 languages. It's incredibly comprehensive, and it's kind of meant to do that. Instead of hunting through fragmented sources all over the internet, Carrots and Sticks makes it easy to find the policy you're looking for. And there's different ways to do this. We've set up filters and tables. And I'm just going to show one or two examples here from, I'll show the table. We can enter the table view here. But I'm going to just here click on the map and go to Italy, where we would see all of the relevant sustainability policies and regulation and legislation. And each one, of course, is part of the database, which means that it's fully accessible as a downloadable PDF, but also has a lot of high-level information. I think it's critical to kind of cut through that mess, cut through that complexity in terms of a summary, whether or not this is in force, which I think is absolutely critical, and some other indicators that we've been laying on in the Carrots and Sticks space for some times, main industries targeted, restrictiveness, and a few other things. One major new feature for Carrots and Sticks is that, and I'm going to run this in real time, is that we can actually run an AI-assisted update for this specific policy. So all 2,500 plus can be has this function, and it allows you to see a large number of important things here. And I think these are, when I talk to people who are interested in this regulatory space, they say, well, tell me, what's the current status? Who must comply? What are the ramifications for non-compliance? And then what's coming up? What's a bit of horizon scanning that you can tell me? I think this is an exciting new feature in Carrots and Sticks. Okay, I'm going to now go back here and go to kind of, I guess, the main event, which is our CSRD tracker. And this is really something that I think makes Carrots and Sticks uniquely powerful. We've essentially painstakingly mapped CSRD transposition across all relevant countries in a very detailed and again, comprehensive way. And this brings a lot of order to this mess, but in a one-stop shop. So rather than asking, what's this current status here, we know if it's transposed, in progress, or that there's no progress happening here. Again, so what makes this dynamic here is that this is a combination of AI-assisted research, AI-assisted kind of collection and web scraping of this information with human in the loop, where all of these things are confirmed and verified and validated. Now, just to show some of the functionality here, I'll just go down to Latvia, where we can see the extent of detail that we're getting here. I'll move that a bit across this instance, this case of Latvia, if it's transposed. All of these links to all of the relevant legislation or amendments and some further information. And for each country in the tracker, you can get a bit more information. And then the last thing here, and I'm going to slowly come to the end of my presentation, is this downloadable fact sheet that we can get for all countries in the database. So all the information that you've seen there is nicely packaged into a single fact sheet that you can download and get all the information about summaries, stop the clock status, number of companies in scope, information around gold plating, and a bunch more. I find in many instances for this type of project, I have a hard time not going on and on about all of the functionality and bells and whistles, but I'm going to keep it just to the headlines there today to show, I think, what marks the major difference between Carrots and Sticks as it was and Carrots and Sticks as it's now reemerged in Resonate AI. So on that note, I'm going to hand it back to Tab and say thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adam, for that excellent overview of the new features on the database and how users can navigate around the CSRD tracker. I would really encourage all users to really make use of this. It's an entirely free resource, both the database and the CSRD tracker. I'd also like to encourage all of you to please include any questions that you have for our speakers in the Q&A box. As I said before, these will be used in the Q&A session at the end of this event. So please do take the opportunity to ask any questions of our speakers. Now, after this leads very nicely into the insights from our next speaker, Maura Hodge, where we're going to be hearing from the perspectives of sustainability service providers in the US. Maura is a partner at KPMG in the US, and she serves as the US sustainability leader, where she leads all sustainability services across the organization. She spent more than 2 decades in audit and assurance and has been at the forefront of sustainability reporting over the last 15 years, founding KPMG's sustainability assurance practice in 2010 and helping organizations translate transparency into accountability and action. Maura works with boards, executives, and sustainability leaders to navigate the rapidly evolving regulatory landscape of sustainability reporting with a clear focus on value creation, credibility, and impact. She's known for bridging the technical with the practical, helping companies understand not just what they need to report, but how incentives, governance, and decision-making actually drive change. Over to you, Maura.
Thanks, Tab, and thank you all for having me here. It's really exciting to see Carrots and Sticks relaunched. I was not involved at the very beginning, but I have been around for at least 15 years and do remember it when it originally came out, and it's great to see where it's gone now. Tab, if you want to go to my first slide, what I want to, and the one after this, what I want to highlight first is something that Peter Paul had mentioned. Go to the next slide. Around fragmentation and all of the different reporting regulations that are out there. So the great thing about Carrots and Sticks is that it brings it all in one place, but it also includes policies and things beyond just the reporting regulations. So my focus right now is really on reporting. And I know that this is quite a small slide, but that's kind of the point. The idea that we have all of these regulations that we are tracking. And this proliferation of standards really creates risk for business. So maybe a couple of things just to tease out as you're looking at the different regulations that are out there and trying to understand how to approach them. Each regulation has different applicability. Sometimes it's only for public companies, other times it's for private companies or both. They have different disclosure requirements. So the actual qualitative words that need to be written and information that needs to be included. As Peter Paul had mentioned, materiality is often defined differently or evaluated differently. Sometimes different metrics are required to be reported, or measurement of those metrics could be different. So if we talk about workforce, some standards require measuring workforce or disclosing workforce based off of part-time and full-time employees, but then that definition of maybe a part-time employee could include contractors or people who just work less than 40 hours a week or less than 60 hours a week or something, depending on the standards and the regulations within each of the jurisdictions that actually govern employment issues. And so that's one of the biggest things that creates that complexity that Peter Paul was talking about. The thing that we are also experiencing, particularly in the US, but this is, of course, true for any company that has global operations, are all of the timing delays of these regulations. So many of them were proposed or released 3, 4, 5 years ago with an implementation period and then an effective date. And I would say pretty much all of them have been pushed out, at least to a year or two. And it's caused a lot of frustration, really, for companies and management, which you can probably experience or can imagine. And so they've invested a lot of time and effort and cost, and then the standards change, the regulations change, and I think there's just a lot of frustration right now. And so, what companies are really focused on is how do we understand truly what our risks are, and how can we do this in an effective and efficient cost way. So the things that we can help focus companies on and management on in order to be able to continue to move forward, but still not get so fatigued by all of the other things that are happening, are, number one, really understanding the cost of non-compliance. So what are the fines, the regulations, the penalties that will come, and how does that balance against what it is that you're trying to report? There's also a reputational risk where if there's an expectation that you as an organization would put out a sustainability report and you're not doing it, then that also brings risk to the company. There's the second piece of, and this ties into that non-compliance, but really how quickly can you get this information together? So a lot of what we've been doing over the past couple of years is performing gap assessments to help companies understand what information do they actually have, how accurate is that information today, how good are the process and controls over it, so that when the date actually does come for required reporting, how quickly can you meet those requirements? And I would say one of the other risks that we've seen or experienced is that a lot of companies tend to lose the forest for the trees when they're trying to approach these regulations. So what I mean by that is there are so many line items in the regulations that companies are trying to follow. And so we go through each one. Let's say there's 2,000 of them. And then we get all this information of stuff that we have to do and gaps that we need to close. And it just gets so overwhelming. And we lose the point that really what we're trying to do are identify our impacts on the environment and society and the financial risks and opportunities to business as a result of using the environment and human capital, and then address them with business activities. And so I think what I would encourage folks to do as they're working through these regulations is to really take that step back, understand where your true material issues are, and think about how you're going to address them, and then do the reporting around them. So my last slide that I have is really the way that we have been talking about sustainability and reporting. There is certainly fatigue around all of this information. And to be quite honest, there are other really big things that are happening in the world that maybe are not more important, but certainly are more front and center. So in the US, of course, the tariff wars, and I'm sure this is true around the world as well, all of the geopolitical issues, war in the Middle East and in the Russia and Ukraine. And then, of course, AI has really taken up a lot of the air in the room. And so companies are trying to allocate the resources across all of these different challenges. And so when we go to boards and we go to management to talk to them, here's 5 areas that we're asking them to focus on. The first 2 really circle around that compliance, and that's where carrots and sticks can help you. Number 1, make sure you understand what your expectations are and what you actually have to comply with, and then define a clear reporting strategy around that. Then the next 3 are really, I think, what's most important, which is how do you build out the business case and help leadership understand the value of sustainability to their business? And the first place that I would start, or that we recommend to start, is really performing that double materiality assessment to understand strategically what it is the business should be focused on in terms of impacts, risks, and opportunities. Once you've identified those topics and those specific areas that really relate to your business strategy, then it's about being able to link it to financial results, understanding future anticipated financial effects, but also current effects. And KPMG is doing a lot of work in this area right now. Looking at your governance structure and understanding who is going to be responsible for acting on any of the goals or targets or policies that have been set. And then ultimately sharpening that narrative. So going back to the basics, understanding business strategy, understanding how sustainability promotes that business strategy, and making sure that the organization as a whole is talking about it consistently. So I think the thing that I would leave you with last is, it's so important to agree on that core messaging. And that was one of Peter Paul's points when he kicked off, that you need a North Star as an organization in terms of how sustainability links to your business strategy. And if you can get that organized, everything else can flow from it. And then you can figure out how to make it align with your reporting requirements from all this fragmented regulation. So I'll turn it back to Tab.
Thank you so much, Maura, for those fascinating insights from KPMG. We're seeing a very, very clear pattern from the speakers, which is the emphasis that we need to avoid fragmentation. And we've just heard from Maura how this is very clearly impacting companies when it comes to their resource allocation. And this was set out very nicely. Now, these insights will segue very nicely into our next speaker, which is Chris Coulter, where he'll be providing us with some insights from global stakeholders who are leaders in sustainability. Chris Coulter is the CEO of Globescan, which is the insights and advisory firm. Chris has 2 decades of experience in providing evidence-based counsel in the areas of reputation, sustainability, and engagement. And he's also a co-host of the podcast All In, the Sustainable Business Podcast. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks so much, Tabitha, and what a wonderful conversation we're having so far. As Tabitha said, I will share a little bit of some research that we did that almost a year ago, but it still feels very timely. And this is on the next slide, is from our Sustainability at a Crossroads survey and piece of research that we did together with ERM and Volans in May last year. And we surveyed 844 global sustainability experts to get a sense of how they understand the current context. And what was revelatory for us in the research is that we had over 9 in 10 of these experts across the world from 72 countries that thought the status quo on sustainability is insufficient and unsatisfying. And in fact, 56% of experts said we need to radically revise our approach to sustainability. And there are many different reasons why that is. People have different perspectives, but overall, it tells us that what we're going through right now in sustainability and corporate sustainability is a new phase, and it's a teachable moment. We're open to new ideas collectively. We're interested in innovative aspects, and we're unsatisfied with our progress. And there's lots of different reasons behind that. The backlash against ESG and sustainability, the fact that we have the macro trends from climate and biodiversity and inequality measures going in the wrong direction, and some of that frustration is seeping out into the direction to go forward. So the next slide just shows a very dramatic visual, and we'll take a deep breath as we look at it. But in the study, we identified 64 specific sustainability initiatives and actions. And we asked stakeholders to laboriously rate each one on two dimensions. One, the potential impact of doing more of this to 2030. So if we do more carbon pricing mechanisms, more subsidies, more reporting, how much impact will that deliver broadly? And the horizontal axis was around feasibility, given the current economic, political, technological, sociological context. How feasible is it to make more progress on a certain issue? And the color of, and we can't look at all this in detail, but it's available on our website, and it's worth perusing. But the colors of the dots are also relevant. We identified which actor is most likely to lead on the issue. Is it a government public policy actor? Is it a capital market or investor actor? Is it a company? Or is it civil society? So in the top right-hand quadrant, where we have higher impact and higher feasibility on these issues, we see multiple colored dots. Everyone needs to play a role here. We do need good public policy. We do need capital markets to respond. We need business to do things. And we also need civil society to keep us accountable. So that on its own is an important finding, that there is this ecosystem of change that stakeholders still see quite relevant. And one of the challenges in the conversations we've had in sustainability the last couple of years is one of the axes of disagreement has been, it's just about business, put our head down, it's all about the business case, that's all that matters. And that is true. We do need to drive more commercial aspects of sustainability through the business. And in the top right-hand quadrant, we do have commercialization as a priority. We have technological innovation as a priority. And these are absolutely indispensable to drive the enterprise-wide approach to sustainability and get the scale and reach we need. However, there's also a sense that we need political activism. We need behavior change. We need to change the preferences and the cultural conversation of what we're doing. We need innovation around sustainable finance and engaging investors in different ways. So it's this mix of a direction and the focus that I think is really compelling. When it comes to reporting, because we've been talking about that quite a bit, there's quite a difference between mandatory sustainability reporting, which is viewed in the top right-hand quadrant, high impact and highly feasible, and voluntary reporting, which is the very bottom on the bottom right. So very feasible, obviously, but really low impact. So that differentiation is fundamental for us to understand that it's about mandatory, consistent, comparable reporting that stakeholders find as the impact driver. If we just show the next slide, there at a high level, there is this transition from the bottom left-hand quadrant, which is populated with a number of almost quasi-sacred things in sustainability. We have the SDGs in this quadrant. We have B Corp certification. We have the UN Global Compact. We even have the Paris Agreement here and the just transition concept and things like that. And these voluntary principle-led aspects are today by stakeholders I don't think they're dismissing them. The value of them was historic rather than forward-looking. That we needed all of this governance and this infrastructure to define the agenda, to create an open big tent, to populate it with many different actors in it, and give us the North Star going forward. However, in this challenging multilateral context today, I think stakeholders are saying there's not that much juice left in that orange to squeeze. So we do need to think of new approaches and maybe more shorter term action oriented aspects, from commercializing sustainability to really getting circularity right, to implementing and leveraging technology more effectively, to driving better public policy advocacy. These are the hot topics. So we have, I think, moved from 15 years ago, 10 years ago, where we built up and stood up all these principles and frameworks, that were, I think, critical to get us to today. We're now in a moment where we're looking at again, the fragmentation word that Peter Paul used, a fragmented set of priorities to drive sustainability forward that probably don't have the cohesive governance required to really mainstream and scale some of these, not just among leading Fortune 1000 companies, but really the tens and tens of thousands of multinational companies on the planet who are still getting into this. I'll just say one last point and then pass it back to you, Tabitha. In this piece of research, we also did a segmentation of the sustainability community, and we found there are very different perspectives and worldviews on sustainability, and it partly depends if you're in business or if you're in an NGO or in government or if you're an academic. However, it goes beyond that. And we do have a tension and an interesting, I think, creative tension in how different parts of this sustainability community worldwide sees where we should go. There is a tension between broadly, are we embracing the market and creating market mechanisms to stoke demand? Is that the focus? And or are we creating space for collective action to drive collaboration among many different actors? And that, I think, sort of describes the challenge and the crossroads we're at. And of course, the answer is we have to do both, right? Like that's given its sustainability and it encompasses almost everything. That's our focus. So we need better ways to integrate some of these perspectives going forward and bring them all together. Okay, I'll pause here and pass it back to you, Tabitha. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris. That was really, really, really insightful to hear the high-level observations that you have from this survey. I think this really highlights how much of a complex, almost ecosystem we have of various actors in the sustainability world, and how critical it is that in order to move forward, we also need to understand the different perspective of all these different stakeholders. Now, going back to our agenda, we were meant to be hearing from Wim Bartels, who is a sustainability partner at Deloitte and also on the EFRAG Sustainability Reporting Board. Unfortunately, he's having issues joining us today. So instead,
I've got to chime in here. Wim is with us. I can see him below. Yeah, we're good. Yeah,
fantastic.
Back to you.
I am.
Excellent. So I'll just introduce Wim. As I mentioned, Wim has been advising in this field of sustainability since 2003. He's provided assurance on sustainability reports for nearly 20 years, particularly for multinational enterprises in and outside of the Netherlands. He's been a member of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures since its inception in 2015. Currently, he's working as a partner at Deloitte, and as I mentioned, he's a member of the EFRAG Sustainability Reporting Board and also chairman of the Sustainability Policy Group of Accountancy Europe. Prior to his sustainability role, he worked as a fraud investigator and auditor. And I should also mention, given that we are launching the new Carrots and Sticks, Wim was also involved in the inception of Carrots and Sticks. So over to you, Wim.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tab. I'm sorry for the connection issues earlier. Indeed, let me start with saying it's good to be back with Carrots and Sticks. I think in these days we really need this overview of what's going on in the regulatory space that we started with 20 years ago now. What I would like to cover in my couple of minutes before we may get into further discussion is what we see in the landscape and what is happening. You are, I assume, all aware of the CSRD and the ESRS and where we stand with that. Now, Tab, I don't know whether the slide is available that shows the essence. Yes, indeed. If we go one slide down, then I can just 1 minute bring it back to the very essence of the ESRSs. As you know, they have been simplified, but in reality, the concepts all stayed, and they are on this slide. Once I have shared it, we can discuss it. We can take it off. It's up to me. But of course, it starts with that double materiality assessment, and then essentially the standards ask you for each ESG issue that you have identified. What are your policies if you have? What are your targets that you have set if you have? What are the action plans that you have implemented if you have? And what are the metrics that you use for performance, again, if you have? And then overarching, what is the governance and strategy? And for me, this essence is really important to also show here because it links to what I want to briefly touch upon for the rest of my introduction, which is, and where do we go from here? Time-wise, of course, by mid this year, we'll see the final ESRSs, so that is to be awaited from the European Commission. But again, I think the concepts will stay. And then what will happen over time? I think what we can see is, and I was having discussions earlier this week, also with representatives of Commission, is that we will see further guidance. We have moved much closer to a principle-based framework here, and I think we'll see more guidance therefore over time, and also more learning by all of us in the years to come on what it really means to apply ESRSs now that we have taken out all these detailed data points that companies started to report against, but that was never the intention. What do we see globally? I think the European standards already got a lot of attention globally, but with where they stand now, I think we can see further increase there. You may be aware, and if not, you can find it in the Carrots and Sticks update and the website, that China has also looked into ESRS and implemented the double materiality principle in its disclosure requirements for large companies in China. So you can see that with that only, that in various parts of the world, the standards are being looked at. We know that the US is currently a bit of an exception, but I know from my conversations with US companies that they still look into the ESRSs and the double materiality principle as they understand the relevance of it for their global companies. And that also drives further interoperability. We at AFREX Sustainability Reporting Board have worked intensely with particularly ISSB. We were requested to by the European Commission, but I think it also moving forward will be further driving to that interoperability. That means collaboration where it is about what are we exactly meaning with anticipated financial effects, how could you go about these, what may be methodologies, etc., to just name one example. And that interoperability is a critical issue, of course, for companies, because without that they would be subject to multiple methodologies, multiple requirements, and that creates a lot of reporting burden without really changing and advancing the business. And the same applies, I think, to regulators that also want harmonization and alignment between them to make sure that they do not overburden the companies within their region. And particularly in the European Union, I think over the past year, that has been the driving force for the simplification of the standards. Going forward, I think more to expect in the carrots and sticks ecosystem, but also more to expect from the standards where it is about guidance and how to really implement them. And for all of us who are in business, more to expect in learning about what it really means and how you can report in a meaningful way about how you manage your ESG issues and how you make progress. And that is my brief introduction, Tab. So I leave it to that, and back to you for any further discussion we may have.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Wim. We really appreciate your insights, particularly given your work with EFRAG. You're so technically boots on the ground when it comes to sustainability reporting. And I'm sure as the audience have also noticed, we're noticing such a clear pattern when it comes to emphasis on harmonization and avoiding increased reporting burdens, as this tends to detract away from true meaningful reporting. So with Wim finishing, we now conclude the end of our individual speaker presentations. I'm now going to be moving you on to Yannis Tsalavoutas, who will be doing both the moderated panel discussion and will also be directing any audience questions towards all of our speakers. So while I introduce Yannis, I kindly ask that all of our speakers turn their cameras on. So Yannis is a professor of accounting and finance at Glasgow University. He's worked as an accountant in Greece and as a financial accounting and reporting analyst in Scotland. He's also a member of the ICAS Corporate and Financial Reporting Panel and founder and leader of the Adam Smith Observatory of Corporate Reporting Practices. I'll now hand you over to Yannis for the panel discussion and audience Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Tab, and thanks to all panelists for the interesting and very timely insights given how things develop around this topic. In the interest of time, I would like to pick up some of the questions that our attendees have put in the chat, address them to specific panelists where I think they are more relevant to, but please, the others, feel free to come and add your own insights. And I have also kept some notes here from your discussions and presentations that I would like to follow up on a few things, but let's see how things develop in terms of time, okay? So perhaps I would start, given that the event relates to the relaunch of carrots and sticks, I would start with Adam. One question to Adam. One of the attendees asks, how do you update the data of the platform if there is any new regulation at a particular country, right? Given that one particular feature of the platform is to look at monitor of implementation of the regulation. So, yeah.
It's a great question. I'm going to give a slightly technical answer. It's something that we've developed at Resonate that I like to call a search, filter, scrape, label, analyze pipeline. So we kind of intelligently search a large number of relevant agencies and authorities, right, in terms of like understanding where their URLs and how to find them, and then have a machine learning algorithm that allows us to say, is this relevant or not, with a certain degree of probability, and then pull it back. That's the AI automation part, but then there's the human in the loop part where we verify. And so this actually probably is responsible for about 60 to 70% of what we're getting regularly. And then the next part is friends of friends of carrots and sticks. For a long time, this has been a platform for 20 years, and people routinely write in to say, there's this new policy, can you add this? There's this great spread working with the Global Reporting Initiative over time geographically that allows us to kind of fill out places where we feel like maybe our coverage is not as strong as it could be. But that's it. It's essentially automation, human in the loop, and then friends of carrots and sticks.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Then I will move on to another question here, and perhaps go back to Peter Paul, where he mentioned, he was the first to mention in the discussions here about fragmentation. So I will pose the question to you, but please, the others feel free to come in, okay? So the question is basically, do we see this fragmentation reducing over the next few years, 2-3 years, or you think that given that we have a couple of big standard setters out there and standards already, do you think it is here to stay?
Yannis, thanks for the question. I think there's two parts of the answer. I hope it's gone. I am not yet convinced that it's going to happen this fast. I was very hopeful when Wim made the comment that EFRAG is now working with the ISSB and that interoperability is on the table and we're making big steps. But what I've seen over the last 7-8 years that I've been engaged in this, there is a gap between intent and actual reality when it comes to achieving this comparable information. And I think that that's important that it is addressed, and that the political community, to a large extent, also allows the standard setters to actually work together and get to this more harmonized approach and actually mandates that to do that, because otherwise, as we've heard Maura talk about the compliance costs that are involved, and Wim mentioned it, but I want to quickly mention one other thing, that there's not a real price tag that's being overlooked, and why this is important too, and that's namely, recently the National Bureau of Economic Research in the US was looking at the impact of policy uncertainty, whether it's existing or the fact that it's uncertain, not what's in the law, but the fact that there is no certainty about the law. And it's showing that industrial production is down 0.7%, private investments are down 2% at least, and those firms with high climate risk exposures see deeper cuts to their investment in R&D. So productivity falls and stays down because of the whiplash around policy, regardless of what's in it. So I think that's an important point to also keep in mind.
Okay, thanks. Now I will go to the next question, perhaps addressed to Wim, but I don't know, given his Deloitte hat on, and then perhaps Maura wants to touch on that. A practical question, one of the attendees asks, companies should report a lot of information across various areas, right? So climate, biodiversity, social governance, all these are very important matters, but the reporting involves a lot of data collection and analysis for reporting reliable and comparable information. So at least at the stage where we are, from a practical point of view, we would think that firms prioritize on some that they think are more important or less important, or more, it is easier to collect the information, more reliable information. So what do you see in practice? Do firms end up, at least at this stage, prioritizing reporting, or how do they respond to these reporting requirements?
Yes, thank you, Yannis. So what we have seen in Wave 1 is a lot of what I would call compliance focus. So let us get over the hurdle and get a report out that is signed off by the auditor. Also, that also meant that data collection was in most cases not, let's say, further advanced in terms of technology and integration into the firms. What we see now is that, and I think honestly that the updated ESRS will help there. We don't need reporting on metrics that you only report for the sake of reporting. We need the metrics, also from the SRB perspective. We need the metrics that you manage, where we can see progress. Are companies then prioritizing? Yes, they prioritize the most critical areas. So you can imagine, if you are in manufacturing, that some of the environmental, carbon and circularity or waste are very critical. On the social side, health and safety, and all the rest comes then later. At this moment, we see first steps into building the full technology architecture and really setting it up, and that's very encouraging. Because it means that we really are going to integrate into the companies.
Thanks, Wim. Maura, I will address a question to you, but before then, address a question to Chris, please. So Peter and other panelists, and also yourself, mentioned the use of AI. And I would like to hear a little bit more. I mean, even Adam mentioned AI in the way Carrots and Sticks, is an AI-assisted tool. Could you please give us briefly some insights on how AI is used for preparation of the reports, but also from the advisory side of things, okay? How I wouldn't want, KPMG's approach or Deloitte's approach, thinking of him. Just tell us a little bit, give some context on how AI is used on both sides. Yeah.
Yes, of course. So I think one of the things to remember is that AI means a lot of things, right? We often go at it thinking generative AI, agentic AI, this is how we are learning to interact with AI today. But we also have to remember that things like machine learning and talk to text are also AI. And actually, with some of the challenges that companies have around collecting the data, organizing the data, ultimately validating it, those types of AI are actually really valuable and sometimes get lost. So maybe as a bit of a response to the question that you had asked Wim previously on prioritization, and then where specifically we see AI being used or being of value, I think it's really important to first start out with doing a double materiality assessment, right? Identifying what your key material issues are, defining what it is that you're doing, and then using existing metrics to measure that, right? And particularly ones that are in standards, but of course, if you as a business are using others, making sure that those are well defined. So within that context, we're seeing AI being used to help manage the double materiality process, both to collect the information that's necessary, to evaluate it, to update and kind of crunch the numbers as you're going through, and then being able to refresh it quite easily for future periods and future years. When we talk about the data piece, we're seeing technology and AI being used to read invoices and pull the data in that's necessary to be able to do calculations based off of usage or kilowatt hours. We're seeing it to write standard operating procedures and allowing companies or individuals who are pulling that data just to be able to explain the process and then have that all be written out in a manual. We are using it and seeing it for tagging of information. So for instance, scope 3, category 1, all of your purchased goods and services, being able to tag it to the right type of information so that the right emission factor can be attached to it. That really speeds up the process. And then ultimately, we're seeing it help write disclosures for companies and, look at the guidance, look at what they've prepared and all sorts of internal documentation, and then begin to pull together some draft disclosures. So hopefully some practical tips on where companies are using AI. KPMG is particularly from an assurance perspective, utilizing AI in our assurance approach in the same way that we do for audit. Being able to read through the standards, understand how the standards apply to what companies are reporting and how they're pulling their information together, and then being able to evaluate it in that way. And then really just building our own agents and interacting with AI to understand context around companies and information that they've produced in the past.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Maura. That's very, very helpful. And I will raise the last question for the session to Chris, which is a little bit more high level in the sense, if we go back to the substance of all this, right? Why we are asking, or regulators are asking, and stakeholders are asking firms for all this information to be reported, right? I guess the idea is we want a sustainable future for the businesses, the economy, and society, right? And I would like to hear your perspective from how you see companies when you engage with firms, right? Are you optimistic that, these regulations, okay, in different forms, do assist in achieving sustainability, or are you more pessimistic that we kind of focus on the reporting side of things and the substance of sustainability kind of is forgotten?
Yeah, it's a good question, Yannis. So I think as Madeleine Albright said, I'm an optimist, but I worry a lot. I think that's sort of where the sustainability world is at. We have to be optimistic. We have seen dramatic progress, right? Sustainable development is 39 years old. We've done a lot in those 4 decades. We're halfway there, probably. This is an extraordinarily ambitious project we're trying to do of creating a sustainable economy, society, and environment. But we do go through ups and downs, and we're in a little bit of, John Elkington's called it a sustainability recession. I think to a degree that's true. I do think we have gotten, and all this conversation has been really fantastic to articulate that we've gotten to a much smarter, more thoughtful approach to the reporting and disclosure side of things. This needs, as Wim said, needs to go into performance management, right? That's what it's for. That's fundamental. But we've also in the last, and I think you've all made the case, and Adam, you made it really clearly that there's enough regulations across the world that if you're a global company, it'd be ridiculous to give up on this and to stop. It's clearly underpinning, and even the 3 C's is enough, right? China, the Commission, and California. That's all you need as a global company. It's like, okay, well, we're in the disclosure game. We have to be. But I do find in the last couple of years, especially with the political risk moving, there's a bit of a narrative in sustainability, to corporate sustainability, that we're not going backwards, we're holding tight. We're holding on, we're doing the work, we're quiet, but underneath our enterprise hood, we're doing the work. I think that's fantastic. That's better than going backwards. However, we need to begin to find our second gear again, our level of ambition, because again, the macro context isn't about stasis. It's about ambition and dramatically improved social and environmental performance, because we're not winning the war on the degradation that's happening to the planet and to our survival, essentially. So I think, collectively have to get beyond some of these things and get back into, okay, so in this new context, how do we actually get 2 times, 3 times, 5 times performance improvement in a very short period of time because of the urgency and existential threat. So I think we're going to get there, but we need to remain optimistic and then find a level of ambition that we haven't had for a couple of years again.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much.
Over to you.
Thank you so much, Yannis, for moderating this Q&A, and thank you to all of our speakers, and thank you to all of the attendees for joining this session. I'd also like to extend a very special thank you to the Carrots and Sticks institutional ties that we have, in particular our advisory board, Peter Paul van der Wijs, who is in this event, and also Cornis van der Lucht and Alison McKeenan, who who is the Senior Manager of Policy at GRI. We look forward to continuing to leverage their expertise and guidance so that we can continue to grow and develop the Carrots and Sticks database as a free resource. I'd also encourage all audience to please utilize this free resource, and please also get in touch with us when there's policies in your own respective countries that you would like to see on the database. I'll conclude by advising as well and reminding you all that we will be sending out an email with a link to the recording of this event and also the slides from this event. So thank you very much again to the audience and to all of our speakers for a fantastic session. Have a great day, everyone.